Thank you for joining us tonight for CBS News Detroit at 7. I'm Shayna Humphreys. Today was day 3 of the Oxford High School shooter's Miller hearing. It is a legal proceeding to determine if he is eligible to be sentenced to life in prison without parole. For so many people in our community, these first 3 days of this hearing have been deeply emotional and difficult. As prosecutors and defense attorneys continue to make their cases, our Gino Vici was among those in the courtroom witnessing it all. Here he is with the latest.
More disturbing evidence shown inside the courtroom today for day 3 of the Miller hearing. This time it was the defense showing a video of the Oxford shooter in custody yelling and screaming, "God, why didn't you stop this?" An expert witness said the Oxford shooter suffered from severe depression and even psychosis. That witness for the defense also argued the Oxford shooter may have suffered from a brain injury after showing a video where he collapsed at work prior to the shootings. We did not get to closing arguments today, but simply put, the prosecution will likely argue the Oxford shooter knew exactly what he was doing and these murders were premeditated. Again, the defense clearly arguing he is mentally ill and can be rehabilitated. Day 3 wrapped up today, and now Judge Rowe has scheduled the final day of rebuttals to August 18th. And again, at that time, he will weigh all the evidence as it relates to the Miller factors. The judge says he will take his time and review all the evidence as it relates to the Miller factors. And again, that could take days or potentially even weeks. Reporting outside the Oakland County Courthouse, Gino Vici, CBS News, Detroit.
Thank you, Gino. Joining us again today to break down day 3 of this Miller hearing is former Wayne County Circuit Judge Vonda Evans and attorney Sanford Shulman, who has extensive experience with Miller hearing proceedings. Thank you both for sticking around.
Thank you.
I want to bring everyone up to speed. For any of our viewers who haven't been following day by day and are maybe just coming into this, let's start, Sanford, because this is your expertise, with the very point of a Miller hearing.
So today was the defense opportunity to present what's going on with their client. And Dr. King, who I've known before he was an expert in this hearing, who actually assisted me in one of his first hearings of this nature, presented a history of the defendant, his trials and tribulations, to try to give some information to the court about what is his mental capacity, whether he's able to be rehabilitated. And that's the ultimate question. So today was the defense day. But I really truly believe that the most important and most interesting is really yet to come.
All right, and we have these factors, or Judge Rowe has these factors that he must consider when making this determination. Judge Evans, could you bring us up to speed and remind us of what he's really looking out for and listening for in this hearing?
Well, the thing about it is to determine, can this young person be rehabilitated? The doctor said that he suffered from major depressive disorder with psychotic features. You know, according to the medical literature, basically that's somebody has delusions, hallucinations. They have problems cognitively making good decisions, memory, attention span. And so this is a certifiable mental disorder. And so what the judge has to determine is life without parole proper for someone who has been assessed, has never received treatment, was 15 at the time, had a poor family history, and other factors, and obviously the seriousness of the crime. No one we would agree beyond any doubt, this is a horrific situation. It's premeditation, deliberation, we know that. But this part of the hearing is about one thing, and it's going to be whether or not life without parole is what the judge should give.
And one of those key factors is whether the shooter, whether the defendant in one of these cases has any hope of being redeemed. And typically, Sanford, there is more of a history to consider for the court, right?
Yes, most of these types of hearings come with a defendant who comes back after decades because the court made it retroactive. The Miller court initially did not, but the subsequent U.S. Supreme Court did make it retroactive. So you had people who had been in prison for decades, and now we have a track record, a history in the prison of whether they're mentors, whether they're assisting other inmates, what is their life like in terms of establishing this rehabilitation. But in this case, we don't have any of that. Now, I've spoken to colleagues of mine, and we said, well, the prosecutor has to prove he cannot be rehabilitated. They also have no record either, but it's their burden. So in many regards, if you look at it really objectively, they can't show that in 20 or 30 or 40 years, that person is going to be a completely different person, a matured brain, different type of person. The problem with this is that we have a situation of such a severity, such gravity, and yet the demon is a child. That's the problem. The demon is a child. And that's why it bothers us so much. We want to open that door and see the demon, but when we see it's this person that Dr. King has described, that's where the challenge is.
And the challenging thing is that we are the only country in the world that has a penalty like this for juveniles.
Life in prison without the chance of parole.
The only country.
And if that is the decision here, if the judge decides that this case is eligible for that sentence, that's a wrap on the shooter's case, correct?
Well, no, he can appeal, but he can never come back and have another Miller hearing part 2.
Okay. Today got very intense. This entire hearing has been very difficult to watch. Heartbreaking testimony, but today was rather contentious at certain points. Why, Sanford, do you think that happened today, whereas we have seen other experts on the stand in this hearing?
Because this is the most critical part. And what we will see in the next phase is probably the most critical of all. And that is experts who are presenting their opinion as to whether he can be rehabilitated. Dr. King presented very compelling reasons why he can. The people will bring a rebuttal witness who will say he's not. Based on the nature and the circumstances of this case, he cannot be rehabilitated. That's when the defense has to step up with cross-examination. That's when they have to illuminate what Dr. King said today.
And we were discussing this. Who they'll probably get maybe is someone from the forensic center, somebody that is paid by the government in order to make these assessments. And in my tenure, 99% they came back that these people, and they testified favorably for the prosecution. So, you're going to have bias either way, if you look at it that way.
And what is the argument typically there in those 99% of cases? Just that a chance shouldn't be taken?
Is the cup half empty or is it half full? It's just a determination. Based on the same thing that they're looking at, they may argue certain factors are greater than other factors. That's all it is. But the rules are the same, okay? But the strategy is different.
Something I wonder, with no legal experience myself, when I'm watching these hearings unfold, what is the lead-up process to this hearing? When these witnesses are called, have they met repeatedly with whichever side has called them? Have they been put through this questioning over and over again?
No. That's more of a civil environment where you have depositions or interrogatories or discovery like this. And that's why this next witness, this rebuttal witness, is going to be very important. The witness will prepare a report, but the cross-examination is going to be critical. And that's when the defense has to stand up and bring out those issues. And as a practitioner, I think long and hard about what I would do in that courtroom, what type of cross-examination, because this is the two experts that are contradicting each other. One is saying something, day, and the other one's saying night. One is saying that he could be rehabilitated, he should get something less than a mandatory life sentence, and the other one is saying he should die in prison. And the one who's saying he should die in prison, the rebuttal witness, will base it on an idea that the crime is so heinous that there is no reason to rehabilitate him. He can't, he's just too far gone. But I'm really looking forward to hearing from the cross-examination and seeing if they can bring out the light. And maybe some of the ideas that they might do is some of the things you touched on. You might say to the expert, did you actually meet this defendant? Dr. Collins spent 22 hours with him. How about you? Did you spend a minute with him? Did you just review some documents? Are you a rubber stamp for the prosecutor? Have you ever testified in any hearing and you concluded that this defendant in any other hearing should get parole or should get something less than life in sentence?
Or have testified favorably for a defendant?
Ever.
Most of the time, they have not.
Right, so that's cross-examination. That's the kind of cross-examination that the judge is going to look at. This is really the meat and potatoes, because I think in many regards the score is relatively tied. For the reasons that you point out it and Judge Evans has pointed out, the nature and circumstances of the case favor the government, the type of case where there's no lesser included, those factors. But you come down to rehabilitation, experts, because they're prognosticating. They're thinking about the future. Can he be rehabilitated? I think it's a tough call for the expert, for the government, to say he can never be rehabilitated. He's 15, and I can look in the future when he's 40 and 60 and 90. Never be rehabilitated. That's a really tough opinion to come up with, and it's interesting to see how the defense is going to impeach that.
Especially with the fact that there's scientific evidence that shows that the brain is not developed completely for someone of his age. How do you counter that? So this is going to be challenging.
Very difficult, a very high bar, a heavy burden for the prosecution. Today we did just have that one witness on that stand, the psychologist, Dr. King. It did get contentious at moments, and we're going to talk more about that right after the break. Stay with us. I don't know if there's been a better time to start a brand new news operation.
The newsroom was pretty much starting from scratch.
It's fresh, it's innovative.
Lots of energy, lots of passionate reporters.
Knowing what we're starting here puts so much joy in my heart.
We have reporters who are embedded in these communities.
We are part of the neighborhood. Our newsroom is part of your neighborhood.
When it comes to the weather, it's forecasting what's going to fall on your driveway, when is it going to happen, and how might it actually affect your day-to-day life.
We're in your community, we're telling stories that matter to you, that affect you.
Well, we're rethinking the way local news is done in the 21st century and how to tell the most important stories in a compelling way.
I think we're here to listen and actually hear what you're saying, and we're putting together a newscast that will show that.
I want to tell those people's stories because it's needed. Detroit is ready. Get ready because here we come.
Welcome back. We continue our coverage of the Oxford High School shooter's Miller hearing. Today, the defense called one more witness to the stand. That was psychologist Dr. Colin King. He testified that a combination of the shooter's childhood trauma, abusive parents, and a lack of support from the Oxford school system led to what happened on that terrible day. The prosecution then picked apart King's testimony, as well as his report about the shooting.
And you don't mention the defendant shooting Phoebe, right?
I did not.
Or shooting Hannah, right?
I did not.
Or shooting, Hannah or Madison. You don't mention that?
I did not.
Or Tate?
I did not.
Or Justin, right?
I did not.
Or Aiden, or Molly Darnell, or John, or Riley, or Elijah, or Kylie. You don't mention any of that, do you?
I didn't think it was appropriate, sir.
We're joined once again by former Judge Vonda Evans and attorney Sanford Shulman. Help us understand what this was all about today. We saw Dr. King there on the stand, there as an expert witness to provide his expertise. It seemed personal at some point. He was in the hot seat.
He very much was, and his ultimate opinion was that this young man can be redeemed, he can be rehabilitated. But I do think in that segment, it did show a fault in his testimony, that he does not address one of the factors. And although I'm a defense lawyer, looking at it somewhat objectively, he doesn't really talk about the nature and the circumstances. He sidestepped it. And that is a flaw because the prosecutor jumped on it. And those kind of, I don't want to say mistakes, but those kind of holes are what the defense is going to have to do with the prosecutor's experts into saying, well, Dr. King spent 22 hours with this young man. How many minutes did you spend with him? Did you ever see him? Did you ever test him? Did you ever testify before the defense? So that's where cross-examination, as you saw today, sort of illuminated what the prosecutor wanted to talk about, the nature and the circumstances of the case, while the expert dodged it. So what's going to happen with the prosecutor's expert? We'll see how the defense does the same thing.
And to take that one step further, the Miller factors, he wanted him to mention the victims' names. What factor does that play into?
It's one of the first factors. It's the nature and the circumstances of the case. You look at also of the age and maturity of the defendant. You look at whether there's any lesser charges that could be brought, and ultimately whether he could be redeemed or whether there's rehabilitation. So they said basically you're not really addressing one of the factors in the Miller requirements, the elements, and he basically conceded. But I think the last one is the one that's really most important, because that's the one that the judge is, I think, going to have to really weigh. Because if he is found to be something, if the judge finds that he should not get a mandatory life sentence, then we move to the next phase, which is sentencing. And the judge can still impose a sentence of 40 years. And sentencing, the defendant will not be cross-examined if he speaks. It's called allocution. So the question is, has the defense And will the defense bring out those points so that the judge might ultimately find that a sentence of mandatory life in prison is not appropriate because the defendant can be rehabilitated? That's where the defense needs to cross-examine the expert and show that this expert did not really fully examine the defendant, didn't test him, didn't do what we needed to be done to come up with an opinion. Just like the prosecutor cross-examined the defense witness, we're waiting to see how the defense cross-examines their witness.
And the thing about it is that, you know, it's like anything else. He didn't spend a lot of time on that particular factor, but look at the other factors that he did. It's a weight. It's a totality. And sometimes when you start to go in an area you're not familiar or comfortable with, that's when you have a problem. Never ask a question you don't know the answer to. And I think that the doctor just chose not to go there because he's saying it has nothing to do. We know he pled guilty to first-degree premeditated murder. So why should I go down this rabbit hole with this particular prosecutor, because he's then going to say, well, what about the human aspects of this? We all understand that that's there, but at the end of the day, you have to stay on the course, and I think that that's what the doctor did.
And Gina, you know, Judge Evans is absolutely right. When that expert gets on the stand and the defense gets to cross-examine, the defense could ask something like this. You know, would you defer to Dr. King? He spent 22 hours with this young man. Wouldn't you defer to sort of the treating physician? You're not really talking to him, you're not getting into his life or speaking to him. Don't you defer, if you had a treating physician that you saw week after week and then an independent evaluation was done, wouldn't you say, my doctor knows me, that guy doesn't know me, he's just looking at paper? And that's what Judge Evans is saying is, let's see how these experts fare out and let's see who can come up with an opinion that seems more credible and basically based on all the evidence.
Now, a psychologist like Dr. King, are they meeting with the defendant with the intention of testifying, or are they meeting with them as a doctor-patient typical relationship?
Well, after 22 hours, though, you know, it's a fine line. He's not there to prescribe medication or therapy, but I mean, he is looking deep into this person's heart and soul and background. You know, the prosecutor's expert will do none of that. So these are, yes, these are experts who will be testifying, but one does 22 hours with the defendant, and the other one does 0. One looks at records, you know, the other one doesn't do any testing.
And the law allows for one expert to just review documents, testing, and come up with an opinion. This other doctor, who I'm just, you know, guessing, he's not probably spent the number of hours with him, and it's basically been over records, school records, discipline records, testing that the Dr. King did, and then coming up with his assessment or her assessment as to why life without parole is appropriate.
Is the strategy any different? The attorneys on both sides, their tactics, are they any different when they know that they only have to convince one person, the judge, who is highly educated on exactly what these factors are?
Let me say this to you. That's a hard bar because the judge understands, yes, I know this is emotional, but I can set it aside, okay? It's like oil and water. You know, as much as you shake it up, they do separate. It's not that way when you're dealing with a jury because you're pulling at the heartstrings of the judges of the facts, who are the trier of facts, who is a jury.
Yeah, and the media that's involved in this case, I think adds an element to how the attorneys are playing this out. Because there is a judge, and the judge is supposed to say neutral, be less emotional, cut and dry. So in many Miller cases, sometimes you stipulate to reports. In this case, you want to bring them all out because there is public opinion, which is important to all sides as well.
And I think that the judge is doing a phenomenal job. He's not interjecting himself into it. He's like, look, you guys do your job, and I'm going to come up with a final decision. Everybody has a different style, you know. I used to be accused of being a 13th juror sometimes, but it just depends, and I think that he's doing a phenomenal job, and everything that he's going to base his decision on will be evidence that had been presented there, and I know he's going to come up with a good decision. But what I do know, this is not it. It's going to continue to go up, don't you believe?
Yes, and I think the most interesting, most critical phase is coming up, not just in the next phase with the expert, prosecutor's expert, and the cross-examination, but certainly the judge's decision. It's going to be well thought out, and then there's going to be a sentencing phase, irrespective of his decision. If it's mandatory life, it'll be still victim impact with victims' families talking, but if it's less than mandatory life, then the discretion is 25 to 40 years and what sentence is appropriate. So there's much more ahead, which is equally as important and equally as dramatic.
And each side is going to appeal. If it's against them, they're going to take it up. They're going to go to Court of Appeals, Supreme Court, and we may end up in a U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, federal courts often look at these as well.
We are going to take a deeper look at what does come next right after the break. I don't know if there's been a better time to start a brand new news operation.
The newsroom was pretty much starting from scratch.
It's fresh, it's innovative.
Lots of energy, lots of passionate reporters.
Knowing what we're starting here puts so much joy in my heart.
We have reporters who are embedded in these communities.
We are part of the neighborhood. Our newsroom is part of your neighborhood.
When it comes to the weather, it's forecasting what's going to fall on your driveway, when is it going to happen, and how might it actually affect your day-to-day life.
We're in your community. We're telling stories that matter to you, that affect you.
Well, we're rethinking the way local news is done in the 21st century and how to tell the most important stories in a compelling way.
I think we're here to listen and actually hear what you're saying, and we're putting together a newscast that will show that.
I want to tell those people's stories because it's needed. Detroit is ready. Get ready because here we come.
Welcome back. We are still joined by our legal experts tonight, Vonda Evans and Sanford Shulman. This afternoon, we learned that this hearing is going to resume on August 18th. And as you both have explained, it may be a while before all of this is said and done. But give us an idea of what is going through the judge's mind over these next couple of weeks. We still have at least one more day of this Miller hearing. You mentioned earlier today, Vonda, that the judge has taken notes. He's got video, he's got transcripts. He's clearly been saying in the hearing repeatedly, make sure to speak loudly so the record reflects exactly what you said. What's he doing in these next 2 weeks?
You can't be a stenographer. I don't care how long you've been doing it, and there's going to be something you miss. But what I would do in many of the cases that were very factually challenging, whether they were media cases or not, would be to order the transcript myself, to review it, to see if what I put down in my notes matched, and was there anything that I missed. And that way, I know that that record, that certified record, is going to be dependable. Listen, it's high stakes. This is a young judge, his first career, high publicity case all over the world. He wants to make sure he gets it right. He's going to order that transcript, and he's going to be studying. I guarantee you that.
And he will have quite a few more transcripts to go over. Sanford, you have mentioned a number of times what happens on August 18th, day 4 of this hearing, is especially going to be a moment to watch.
I believe so. I think that it culminates in the prosecutor's expert, because the judge has to decide, is he able to be rehabilitated? It's a difficult idea. Can you be rehabilitated? I mean, you think yourself 10, 20 years ago, if you're an adult in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and what were you like then? And if you think about where you are now and you think how different you are, can you imagine for a 15-year-old who's had what the expert today has described in terms of his trauma, what he might be in 20 or 30 or 40 years? So the judge has to rely on an expert. And he's going to have to choose one of these two. And he's going to have to endorse one of these two experts. So he's listening carefully. I don't want to minimize what's happened the last couple of days, but there's been a lot of drama, and it was predictable. I mean, in terms of what lawyers would expect to see and hear. But the experts is where the judge is going to really need to focus on, because that last factor of rehabilitation is always the one in the Miller hearings that the judge has to struggle with. When they have a long history in prison and they see all these tremendous things that a person has done, they can track it. They say, you proved it, but not in this case. So the judge is going to take notes, he's listening carefully, and he's going to listen to the expert's opinion as to what they think is this defendant going to be like in years to come.
And one of the things that I think that is to his benefit, there was no treatment. This young man was crying out and saying, help me, and it fell on deaf ears. Through the school system, through his parents, nobody listened. I agree with Ben. He was crying out, doing things, hoping that somehow somebody was going to say, stop him. It didn't happen. And as a result, unfortunately, this did. We have to be able to understand and take note when people are having meltdowns, mental health challenges. We can't just say, oh, you know what, you're just acting up or you're acting out. Really zero in and say, you know what, what's going on? Give them the time and the attention necessary in order to prevent something like this.
What do you expect, Sanford, from the prosecution? Do they have one potentially slam dunk witness that they've been holding in their back pocket this whole time?
No, they'll present a witness, sort of a forensic expert who works with the Forensic Center, I anticipate, who will have a report. The defense will get that report in anticipation of the testimony, just like the prosecutor got Dr. King's report in anticipation of his testimony. It's the cross-examination we don't know. We know what this report will show and it will talk about, and it will try to refute what Dr. King says. So it's going to be by the book, and it basically is going to say that this act was so heinous that there's no redemption envisioned, that he can't be redeemed, there's no rehabilitation. But you have to understand, the Supreme Court said you use mandatory life in the rarest of occasions, and you have to prove that he cannot be rehabilitated. That's a really pretty high bar, and you have to show that in forever. That's it. He can never, ever be redeemed. It's not really what we naturally would think when we try to consider this, but we want to block that out. We want to give a person the opportunity, the belief, the trust that maybe one day they could be rehabilitated, but then you seem to minimize the hurt. You seem to minimize, but that's all really emotional, and I hate to say it, the judge has to look at it much more pragmatically. He has to look at it in a way that says, can he follow the law? Is there ability to be redeemed? Is there ability to be rehabilitated? And that's where the expert's really going to get picked apart, because he doesn't have a crystal ball and he's trying to project that on a 15-year-old, when we all know that the 15-year-old today is going to be very different than the 45-year-old tomorrow.
What do you think is going to hold more weight? Some of the expert testimony we've heard or the video evidence that we've seen? We saw some pretty disturbing video and audio today showing the shooter's time in jail, an apparent episode he had there. What do you think carries the most weight for the judge?
Well, it's going to be a number of factors, like the Miller, the family, what they didn't do, the school, what they didn't do, his own behavior, how he was having psychotic breaks from reality, and no one gave him any assistance. Days before or a day before this happened, he falls out at work. Oh, stop playing around, kid, you know, suck it up. These are things that are going to say there was an opportunity for him to try to get rehabilitation. He even, I believe the doctor said, he says, I need to see somebody. It fell on deaf ears. That's going to be compelling.
So we know the fourth, potentially final day of this hearing, we won't get a decision there. The judge is going to announce a sentencing date and a date to announce that decision. What happens after that?
Well, first there's going to be the rebuttal witness, and then there's going to be closing arguments, and then there's going to be, the judge is going to basically deliberate, and then he's going to probably have a day where he's going to provide his opinion, and then he's going to set a sentencing date. If it's mandatory life without parole, it's going to be pretty much just a pretty cut and dry hearing. The complainants or the victim's families will still speak, but if it's something less than mandatory life, then that will be yet another very traumatic, drama-filled day where the complainants' families are going to say, give him 40, and the defense is going to say, give him something less. And you know, those are all these are big, big questions still to come.
And you both have said you do expect this to go farther in the court system, right?
Oh, definitely, definitely. There is a case that has just became before the Supreme Court. I want to say Jackson versus Mississippi. That basically the Supreme Court said, listen, inherent incorrigibility or inherent inability to be rehabilitated, you don't even have to put anything on that factor. Yeah. Now what does that basically say? It says, listen, if you go through the factors, you put a little bit on it, but you don't make an extensive finding, you're okay and you can give them life without parole. So we're seeing a lot of very conservative decisions from the Supreme Court. This is not it. This case is going to probably drag out probably for the next 10 to 15 years easily.
Wow.
Yeah. And Justice Kavanaugh has, in that opinion, sort of started restricting what the judges can do, while the Michigan Supreme Court is actually expanding it in a case called Stovall, saying parolable lifers now are eligible as well for resentencing. So even the courts aren't always settled.
And so then it decides if the Supreme Court says, you know what, here's a state interpretation, here's our interpretation, then let us go and make a decision. and they can uphold what Michigan is saying, or they can say, listen, it's not following along with the federal. That's going to be totally different. And the thing about it is, with this court, they're very young justices. They're younger than state judges. And so it's going to be interesting. I say 10 to 15 years before the finality ever occur in this particular matter.
Well, we will be following it. Thank you so much once again to our guests today, Vonda Evans, a former Wayne County judge with more than 2 decades on the bench, and Attorney Sanford Shulman, an expert on Miller hearings. Your insight for both of you has been so helpful in our understanding of this case. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, we will be joined by a doctor to discuss some of the mental health concepts that came up in the hearing today. Stay with us.
Get more news and next weather now. CBS News Detroit is streaming whenever you need us. Download Pluto TV, free on your connected TV or smartphone. Scroll to local news, choose CBS News Detroit, and don't forget to add us to your favorites.
I don't know if there's been a better time to start a brand new news operation.
The newsroom was pretty much starting from scratch.
It's fresh, it's innovative.
Lots of energy, lots of passionate reporters.
Knowing what we're starting here puts so much joy in my heart.
We have reporters who are embedded in these communities.
Many people throughout St. Clair Shores have been fighting to save this water tower.
If there's a miracle out there, get a hold of me.
We are part of the neighborhood. Our newsroom is part of your neighborhood.
Residents here on Stansbury say they are fed up with all this flooding that keeps happening.
Because look, it was like to the middle of the block. Now it's coming all the way to the end of the block.
We shouldn't have to live like this.
Telling the stories that otherwise nobody would know about.
Now, AJ, you went to the downtown boxing gym and you really got to see how this gym is impacting kids' lives.
Yeah, Chris, as soon as I walked in the building, it was very uplifting.
It's a boxing gym, but it's more than boxing. You know, we do homework, we help them with the SAT.
When it comes to the weather, it's forecasting what's going to fall on your driveway, when is it going to happen, and how might it actually affect your day-to-day life.
Hundreds of people continue to call in reporting problems throughout the county.
Cleanup crews working all throughout Metro Detroit.
Get them down and get them cleaned up.
Local news to me means we're in your community, we're telling stories that matter to you, that affect you, that maybe we can get change and things done in your community.
Well, we're rethinking the way local news is done in the 21st century and how to tell the most important stories in a compelling way.
Local news is all about letting people know what's happening in their community.
I think we're here to listen and actually hear what you're saying, and we're putting together a newscast that will show that.
I want to tell those people's stories because it's needed. Detroit is ready. Get ready, because here we come.
Reporting in Dearborn Heights.
Live in Wayne County. Reporting in Adrian.
Live in Livonia.
Reporting from South Lyon, Kelly Vaughn.
CBS News Detroit.
Welcome back. Much of the defense's arguments today at the Oxford High School shooter's hearing centered around the shooter's mental health. They've painted a picture of childhood trauma, abusive parents, and a lack of support from the Oxford school system. Joining me tonight is Dr. Asti Ravo, a clinical psychologist with a focus on trauma, depression, and parenting issues. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
What comes to mind when you're watching a hearing like this and mental health terms, clinical mental health terms are being thrown out left and right? For your average person, it can be a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Today we heard major depressive disorder with psychosis, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression. Many of these things are pretty common, right?
Yes, absolutely. And more common in children who have long history of family dysfunction and trauma. And I think it's really important to emphasize that just because you have a child who struggles with these conditions, or if your child got these diagnoses, it does not mean that your child is going to act out in such a way and hurt people the way this child did.
Right. We were talking off camera a little bit. In horrific, tragic situations like this, we want an answer. There's a very human urge to want to be able to point at one person and one specific thing and say, that was it. That was the cause of all this. But it's a lot more complex than that, isn't it?
It is. And I think when we hear about traumatic events and we experience the secondary trauma from that, or when we're involved as the teachers and the parents and the students in this event, it's overwhelming for the brain, and the brain wants to find a way to digest it. And it can be finding ways that have labels and categories can feel really soothing and regulating. So I can understand why that can be something that people would want to overly focus on, saying, oh, this is the answer. This kid had these specific diagnoses, and that's why he behaved the way he did.
How can people reconcile these terms that they're very common? A lot of people have dealt with severe anxiety, maybe even depression. So for a lot of people, I think it goes through their mind, well, I've experienced that before, and never in a million years would I imagine doing something like that. Why do you think it's so hard for people to put those two things together?
Because that's correct. Having major depressive disorder or anxiety disorder or OCD does not increase your risk of acting in violent ways. They're not correlated in any shape or form. So I can understand why somebody would feel that way, because that's correct.
There's been a lot of focus on the shooter's parents in this case. There
Yes.
will be a separate trial. There are charges against the parents, unprecedented charges, and a lot of talk about what they should have done, when they should have done something. Their case aside, that will all come out in court. What should parents do if their child is quite literally asking for help?
I think it's really important that parents work on making this a common conversation in their family system that is just ongoing, having conversations around emotions and mental health and taking care of our mental health should not be something that is brought up only when things are falling apart. So I think taking a preventive standpoint is really, really effective. Research supports it, that we benefit much more from care if we engage in it when things are not falling apart. But let's say that's not the case, and you can tell that your child is really, really struggling. It can feel really overwhelming to know how to start and where to go and how to get proper care. I think one of the best ways to do is call your primary care doctor, your pediatrician. They often have a lot of good connections, and they also are well trained in being able to do some broad overall screeners and tell parents generally what they think they might be going on. So that's a great starting point that I often tell parents to start with.
The shooter's parents allegedly ignored repeated warning signs, brushed things off as I don't even know what, just brushed them under the rug. How does a parent know the difference between typical teenage behavior, teenage angst, and something that really is more concerning?
I think whenever you're seeing abrupt changes in behavior, changes in sleep, whether they're isolating from peers, not wanting to connect, not wanting to move their bodies, and behaviors around hyper-focusing on specific things that are not age-appropriate, those are for sure really alarming. I think seeing any kind of drastic changes in your child, parents who are attuned and who are engaged and have a good bond with their kids, they pick up on these things rather quickly. And so it's really important, I want to emphasize this to the parents listening, that if you're attuned with your child and you have a relationship with them and you spend time with them throughout the week connecting, you would pick up on your kid not being okay if there's things that are drastically changing in them. Yeah. Unfortunately, in this situation, it sounds like the parents were not involved, were detached, and therefore they missed all the signs.
Yeah. Any ideas or any thoughts for everyone in the community? I mean, I feel so much for the victims who their family members are there in the courtroom going through all of this, kind of reliving it again. Yeah. And just the case moving through the court system, the parents' case, it is sort of re-traumatizing for the whole community. Do you have any thoughts or tips for just taking in this information and sort of everyone being forced to witness it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us to check with ourselves and notice how it feels to take it all in, being able to say, wow, this feels really traumatizing and I can only be the container for it for so long. And it's okay to limit exposure to the media. Yeah. It's okay to set boundaries with friends and colleagues and neighbors and co-workers saying, I don't want to talk about this anymore, or saying, I'm done with the conversation, I'm walking away. I think putting your screen away and making sure you're setting time aside to do things that feel soothing for your nervous system is really important. And finding spaces where others can be the container for it. So for example, friends who are safe, a therapist, where they can take a step back and let you just express how you're feeling is critical.
Absolutely. Dr. Reveau, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Well, we do, of course, want to keep top of mind the 4 students who lost their lives on November 30th of 2021. Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling. 6 other students, as well as a teacher, were also injured in the shooting. Our gavel-to-gavel coverage will pick back up August 18th when the shooter's Miller hearing resumes. You'll be able to watch that hearing in its entirety, plus more insight from our expert guests on CBS News Detroit and streaming all day long on the CBS News app and Pluto TV.